Hello, this is Bob, and I'll be reading the Tuesday, March 11th, 2025 edition of the Fall River Herald News. Today's weather is mostly sunny and breezy, 52 to 59 for a high, 34 to 41 for a low. On Wednesday, it'll be partly sunny, 48 to 55 for a high, 31 to 38 for a low. Thursday, we're looking at cloudy skies, 43 to 50 for a high, 31 to 38 for a low. Friday, it gets even milder, but it'll be partly cloudy, 50 to 57 for a high, 32 to 38 for a low. And Saturday, mostly cloudy, 53 to 60 for a high, 47 to 54 for a low. Sunrise this morning was at 7:03, and the sun sets tonight at 6:47. The first article on the front page is entitled Grant Funds Give Flint Storefronts a Makeover. Shops along Pleasant Street are turning heads with clean brick facades, new awnings, and fresh storefront signs that bring new charm and pride to the Flint. In an area of the neighborhood that sees many a passerby, a push for urban renewal and revitalization, said Michael Dion, Executive Director of the Fall River Community Development Agency, has begun its first phase of improvements. Already, Gilbert's Jewelers at 1370 Pleasant Street, Nellie's Clothing at 1376 Pleasant Street, a barber shop, and a currently vacant storefront between 1370 and 1386 Pleasant Street have an auspicious new look suited to attracting customers. White Rose Bakery at 1642 Pleasant Street joined the four other stores in a first round of applications to the CDA. This is only the beginning, Dion said, and many more business owners want in when it comes to applying for a storefront makeover, which is just one layer in a long-range plan to restore pride back in the Flint, Dion said. Dion said $1.7 million in grant funding has been set aside for infrastructure improvements. Sidewalks, streets, lampposts, and planting trees, he said, are all developable aspects that may receive funding. Last year, State Senator Michael J. Rodriguez, who represents the 1st Bristol and Plymouth District, which includes the city of Fall River, secured $7 million from the landmark Housing Bond Bill originating from the 2024 budget. The bill addresses housing and home ownership in gateway cities like Fall River, but also is intended to supplement infrastructure improvements, asserting neighborhood equity, sustainability, and reducing barriers to development. Dion said the CDA and Coogan administration will welcome Yvonne Howe, the Massachusetts Secretary of the Executive Office of Economic Development, for a visit to show her the Flint sometime in the coming months. Additionally, mini grants sponsored by nonprofits in the city can be used for smaller but significant enhancements along Pleasant Street, Dion said. Fall River is one of 16 communities to receive funding, $100,000, from the Love Your Block grant program established by Bloomberg Philanthropies in partnership with Johns Hopkins University that may be used for resident-led neighborhood revitalization projects between 2024 and 2026. How can the shop ask for a makeover? Well, they need to go through me, Dion said, prodding a stack of paper applications on his desk during an interview with the Herald News. While small business storefronts might be crowding to the front of revitalization efforts, Dion said there are new events planned that involve the community in restoring the Flint. A cleanup day to collect litter, a graffiti day to redress the sides of buildings, and a block party will ask residents to work together with businesses and people, Dion said, and make the Flint a better place to live. The second front page article is entitled, I'll Be Fighting. Alshenkloss talks Social Security Office, housing, bills in Fall River. About 300 people from across southern Massachusetts turned out for a town hall hosted by U.S. Representative Jake Auchincloss on Saturday afternoon, where the congressman promised to fight a potential closure of the Social Security Administration office. For a little over an hour, the third-term congressman responded to questions from the crowd on everything from President Donald Trump's opposition to diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, to the bankruptcy of Steward Health Care, to high energy bills. Auchincloss district stretches as far north as Brookline and Newton, and south to much of Bristol County. Here are 5 topics covered at Auchincloss's town hall. Will the Social Security office in Fall River close? Even before members of the audience broached the subject, Auchincloss said, quote, "Right now we are fighting to keep Social Security office here in Fall River open," end quote. On March 4th, the U.S. General Services Administration published a list that identified 440 non-core assets, mainly buildings and office space, it said were not essential to government operations, and said it intended to sell, lease, or otherwise dispose of them. On this list was the Social Security Administration office at 400 North Main Street. Steve Camara, a former city councilor, said that office served vulnerable people in Fall River, including the disabled and elders who need a hands-on, concrete place to go for Social Security services instead of the Internet. Auchincloss agreed, saying, "You can have my word that I'll be fighting very hard on that front." However, the GSA removed that list a day after it was published. Only 2 federal properties are currently listed for sale, both in California. The GSA website says a new list of non-core assets is coming soon. The affordable housing crisis in Massachusetts. Calling affordable housing, quote, "the single biggest economic challenge facing Massachusetts," end quote, Auchincloss advocated for increasing the overall supply of housing, particularly affordable units. "Like any market, if you want a price to go down, have increased supply," Auchincloss said. "Increasing supply of housing is an important step." He told the crowd that at the federal level, he has advocated for expanding the low-income housing tax credit, which would induce developers to build deed-restricted affordable housing, and wanted to offer developers low-cost loans to help them get the money to build. In the city of Boston, there's 30,000 units of housing permitted, but no shovels in the ground, he said. It's not actually a zoning problem at that point. It's a cost-to-capital issue. But he said this was a high-priority problem. "We've got to get 10 million units of housing built in the next 10 years, or else the average American will have 40 to 50% of their household budget going to the cost of housing. And that's just not tenable," he said. Another topic was high energy bills and how to get help. Auchincloss said he understood that constituents are struggling with high energy bills right now. They have surged in recent months. Noting the state legislators in the front row, including State Senator Michael Rodriguez and State Representatives Carol Fiola, Justin Thurber, Alan Sylvia, and Stephen Willett, Auchincloss said they're all over this. "The best way I can help is by continuing to fund the Low-Income Heating and Energy Assistance Program, which is somewhat inaccurately named because it's actually not just reserved for low-income individuals," he said. "It's open to many who have middle-class salaries as well." Asked what he could do to help with the issue of homelessness in Fall River, Auchincloss said, "Homelessness is a function really of 2 broad vectors. One is the cost of housing, and the other is mental health and substance abuse disorders." Auchincloss said he has backed plans to increase affordable housing, including the Home Investment Partnership Program, through the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development and helped acquire grants from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, funds from the SAMHSA to pay the run the city's FAST team, its homeless outreach arm. When asked why undocumented I'm having trouble this morning. When asked why undocumented migrants are receiving shelter services that seem to be in excess of what homeless citizens receive, Auchincloss said any blame needed to be shifted from the state to the federal level. Massachusetts is paying a lot of money for migrant housing. There's no way around it, he said. That is not Massachusetts' fault. In fact, I think the State House has responded relatively ably to it. That's Congress's fault. Congress did not tackle border security and immigration legislation. On the subject of offshore wind energy on the South Coast, speaking after the meeting to the Herald News, Auchincloss addressed Trump's often repeated stance opposing offshore wind energy, which could affect projects on the South Coast. Just days before Trump's inauguration, Prysmian Group announced it would no longer be building a factory in Somerset to manufacture cables that connect offshore wind turbines to the shore. The president issued a moratorium against wind. That's the direct reason why Prysmian pulled up stakes, Auchincloss said. Prysmian's official statement cites an alignment of market opportunities relative to demand. It does not mention Trump. Auchincloss said, given that the president has opposed wind energy projects, what we need to be focused on is economic development for Brayton Point beyond that cable manufacturing plant, and I'll support state and local efforts to do that. This next article is entitled, Officials Say Frank M. Sylvia School Fire Intentionally Set. 4 juveniles were arrested. 4 juvenile suspects have been identified and arrested following what Fall River Police Lieutenant Matthew Mendez called a comprehensive investigation into the fire that began in the upper levels of the former Frank M. Sylvia School at 138 Hartwell Street. In an interview with the Herald News, Mendes confirmed that the March 1st fire was intentionally set and that each of the 4 suspects have been charged with 1 count of burning a public building, breaking and entering in the daytime with the intent to commit a felony, vandalizing property, and trespassing. The city of Fall River has been working with the Fall River Fire and Police Departments to chart a course, said Mayor Paul Coogan, for how to proceed with the long-condemned property, which may include tearing the building down, according to previous comments made by Building Inspector Glenn Hathaway to Providence News Media. Fall River Fire Chief Jeffrey Bacon said the fire was initially called in mid-afternoon on Saturday, March 1st, by a motorist passing by on Interstate 195 who saw smoke coming out of the 2nd and 3rd floor windows. We gave it a good 40-minute fight, Bacon said at the time, but this building in the state in which it's in and the fact that it's not occupied, it wasn't worth the risk to anybody. No one was injured in the fire. This next article is from the USA Today. Another possible U.S. government shutdown looms. Lawmakers would still get paid, but many jobs would be paused. Yet another government shutdown is looming. If it feels like deja vu, that's because Americans were in the same predicament in December when federal spending was about to dry up and Congress was dragging its feet on passing legislation for it to continue. In that case, a last-minute bipartisan spending bill averted a shutdown that would have left thousands of federal employees furloughed just days before the winter holidays. This time around, Republicans appear confident that a proposal to extend current funding through the end of the fiscal year on September 30th is achievable. But nothing is certain until legislation is officially approved ahead of Friday's deadline. House Speaker Mike Johnson, a Republican from Louisiana, has said he plans a procedural vote on the measure on Monday and aims for passage on Tuesday. President Trump has voiced support for the bill. Were the government to shut down, a majority of federal workers would be forced to stop working and go without pay. For Americans, that also means services deemed non-essential, like food inspections, and some federal health services would also be paused, according to the nonprofit policy organization Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Federal funding runs dry at the end of the day on Friday, so a shutdown would be triggered if a new funding bill is not passed by then. Many federal government agencies and programs that rely on annual funding appropriations would be paused if Congress fails to pass and Trump fails to sign budget legislation. During a government shutdown, hundreds of thousands of federal workers deemed non-essential would be furloughed until funding is passed. When government employees are furloughed, they are temporarily ordered not to work and don't receive any pay, according to the United States Office of Personnel Management. However, furloughed employees who are not allowed to work or who do not receive paychecks are still guaranteed back pay due to the legislation passed in January 2019. Employees whose work is classified as an essential service for critical operations in defense, energy, agriculture, and other sectors would continue to work, but without pay. Under the 2019 law, they also would be reimbursed later for retroactive wages. Each federal agency develops its own shutdown plan based on previous shutdowns and guidance from the Office of Management and Budget, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Here's what we know about what would happen during a shutdown based on past shutdowns and a plan the White House outlined in 2023. Law enforcement. Agents at the FBI, Drug Enforcement Administration, and other federal law enforcement agencies would remain on the job, as would prison staffers. Most Border Patrol immigration enforcement agents and customs agents would continue to work, though local governments would not receive new aid for migrant shelters. The Secret Service and Coast Guard would also continue to operate at nearly full staff. Transportation. Any travel plans are unlikely to be disrupted. Transportation Security Administration agents who operate security at airports, as well as air traffic controllers, would be required to work. However, in past shutdowns, some airports have struggled with staffers not reporting to work, which forced some operations to be suspended, and the TSA would not be able to hire new airport security screeners. U.S. Postal Service. Mail carriers deliver post in snow, rain, and heat, and government shutdown. The U.S. Postal Service would not be affected because it does not depend on congressional funding. The U.S. military. The 2 million U.S. military personnel would remain on duty. Roughly half of the Pentagon's 800,000 civilian employees, however, would be furloughed. Nuclear security remains an essential function, meaning the Department of Energy's National Security Administration would continue maintaining nuclear weapons. The national parks. Well, national parks, monuments, and other sites would technically be closed to the public. Visitors may still be able to get in, but rangers would not be around, and infrastructure like restrooms, help desks, and other facilities would be closed. In previous shutdowns, some national parks closed entirely, while others remained technically open but without staff to maintain them. Some fell into disarray with trash piling up and toilets overflowing. Wildfire fighting efforts, however, would continue. The Internal Revenue Service. Essential IRS operations would continue thanks to funds provided in the Inflation Reduction Act, making about a third of the agency's nearly 90,000 employees exempt from furlough. That's good news for taxpayers, home buyers, and other loan seekers. In 2013, a backlog of 1.2 million income and Social Security number verification requests delayed mortgage and other loan approvals, and billions of dollars of tax refunds were also delayed, according to the CRFB. NASA would continue to track satellites, operate the International Space Station, and support astronauts in orbit. But the space agency would do so with a severely diminished workforce, with the vast majority of its staff targeted for furlough status. Lawmakers would continue to collect paychecks even as some of their non-essential staffers would be furloughed. And the White House, well, during past shutdowns, the White House furloughed a significant portion of its staff, according to Reuters. Essential offices like the National Security Council will continue operating while others will be scaled back. Under the Constitution, the president would continue to be compensated. Most federal workers and contractors would be eligible for unemployment. Those who believe they're eligible can visit the Department of Unemployment Services website to file in the jurisdictions where they work, not where they live. There are two obituaries in today's paper. The first, that of Dr. Dominic Francis Corrigan, age 83, of northeastern Mass, formerly of Middletown, Rhode Island, and Jenkintown, Pennsylvania, passed away peacefully on Saturday, March 8, 2025, surrounded by his loving family. He was the devoted husband of Margaret D. Grady Corrigan, with whom he shared 58 wonderful years of marriage. Born in Fall River, Dominic was the son of the late Dr. John C. Corrigan and Elizabeth Corrigan. He was a proud graduate of the Portsmouth Abbey School and the College of the Holy Cross before earning his medical degree from Tufts University School of Medicine in 1967. A dedicated physician and veteran, Dr. Corrigan served with distinction in the U.S. Army, retiring as a lieutenant colonel. He was the chief of medicine at the U.S. Army Hospital in Berlin, Germany, and later served as the assistant chief of endocrinology at Brooke Army Medical Center in Texas. He completed his fellowship training in endocrinology at Walter Reed Medical Center in Washington, D.C. Following his military service, Dr. Corrigan moved to Pennsylvania, where he became the chief of endocrinology at Abington Memorial Hospital, also serving as director of the Diabetes Treatment Center. He was a respected member of the clinical faculty at the University of Pennsylvania, mentoring countless medical students and residents throughout his career. In 2003, he returned to New England and joined the faculty of the Warren Alpert Medical School of Brown University, as well as the Division of Endocrinology at Rhode Island Hospital. A gifted physician, educator, and mentor, he dedicated his life to improving patient care and advancing medical knowledge. While his professional accomplishments were many, Dr. Corrigan's greatest joy came from his family. He treasured time spent with his 9 grandchildren, whether organizing legendary Jenga tournaments or sharing stories at Baker's Beach in Westport, Mass., engaging in online chess matches, or entertaining all with his show-stopping rendition of Mac the Knife in the D Lounge on Disney Cruises. Family and friends are invited to honor Dr. Corrigan's life at his visitation on Wednesday, March 12th, from 4 to 7 p.m., and again on Thursday, March 13th, from 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. at Waring Sullivan Home at Cherry Place, 178 Winter Street in Fall River. A funeral mass will be celebrated at 10 a.m. on Thursday at Holy Name Church, 709 Hanover Street in Fall River. Burial will follow in St. Patrick's Cemetery. In lieu of flowers, contributions in Dr. Corrigan's honor may be made to the American Diabetes Association, P.O. Box 7023, Merrifield, Virginia. For tributes and directions, please visit www.waring-sullivan.com. The second obituary in today's paper is that of William L. Manville. He's 84 years old, a lifelong Fall River resident and loving husband, father, and papa, passed away on March 8, 2025, after a period of declining health. He was predeceased by his beloved wife, Nancy R. Fish Manville, with whom he shared over 55 years of marriage. Born in Fall River, William was the son of the late Wilford T. Manville and Margaret E. Manville, and the brother of the late Thomas P. Manville. A 1959 graduate of Diamond Vocational High School, William was the former manager of Walter's Roast Beef, vice president at Valcourt Industrial Supply, outside sales representative for Ralco Electric, and an active member of the former St. Peter and Paul Parish. A self-taught painter, local art historian, Fall River history buff, antique collector, Victorian-era aficionado, art reframer restorer, and expert flea market flipper, as well as a sharp dresser, William held past memberships including board positions in the Niagara Neighborhood Association, Fall River Historical Society, Preservation Society of Fall River, and Art Association of Fall River. He also ran a booth for several years at New Bedford Antiques at the Cove. But what was most important to William was his family, whether it was playing the slots at Encore or Tiverton Casino, entertaining family and friends at the backyard pool, listening to his favorite musical artist, Harry Chapin, watching Antiques Roadshow and Mysteries on PBS, having breakfast at Newport Creamery, dispensing financial and investment advice, or looking for yard sales on the Middleborough Run, William never missed an opportunity to share his interests with his daughters, his sons-in-law, and his grandchildren, especially the Portuguese boys. The family would like to thank South Coast Health at Home, Bristol Aging and Wellness, and the private duty CNAs and caregivers for the care and compassion extended to William over the last several months, allowing him to remain in his own home during this difficult time. We are forever grateful. Calling hours for William will take place on Thursday, March 13th from 4 to 7 p.m. in the Hathaway Home for Funerals, 1813 Robeson Street in Fall River. His funeral service will be celebrated on Friday at 10 a.m. in the funeral home. Interment will follow in Oak Grove Cemetery in Fall River. In lieu of flowers, please consider a donation to Bristol Aging and Wellness Meals on Wheels, 1 Father DeVal's Boulevard, Unit 8, Fall River, Mass. Or the South Coast Health at Home Philanthropy Department Supportive Care, 141 Page Street in New Bedford. For online family register, please visit www.hathawayfunerals.com. We've just about reached the end of our time together. Once again, today's weather will be mostly sunny but breezy, 52 to 59 for a high, 34 to 41 for a low. And tomorrow will be partly sunny, 48 to 55 for a high, 31 to 38 for a low. This has been Bob reading the Tuesday, March 11th, 2025 edition of the Fall River Herald News. Thank you very much for listening, and have a pleasant day.